Welcome to the Nevada Patriot Podcast with Matt Sadler.
Another episode of the Nevada Patriot Podcast with Matt Sadler starts now. I'm Matt Sadler, but today I'm identifying as a ticked-off constitutionally conservative citizen. Man, oh man, what is happening in this state of mind? What is happening here, Nevada? Not sure if we're on pace to ever correct this ship. We surely have our work cut out for us. Nevada's slowly becoming almost exactly like our neighbors in California, but just further from the nice beaches. Wow. Where is the authenticity with our politicians? Where are the real Republicans in the state? Are they asleep at the wheel? Are they sitting at home making TikTok videos? A lot of them definitely are not representing us in Carson City, I can tell you that. Maybe some of you listening here need to get off the couch and run for office. In all seriousness, maybe that's one part of the solution. Today we're going to highlight the latest happenings as the legislative session in Nevada is ending. The latest happenings with the laws and policies in our state, what that means for you and me, what that means for our future. Also, we'll talk about what needs to be done here. And I'm not talking about abstract, ideal world scenarios, but the reality of the battlefield. We conservatives sometimes, I think we feel like the war that we're fighting is an open battlefield, or like in Braveheart or the glamorous war movies, like the awesome Top Gun jet fighter missions. But what we're facing is more like a gritty, bloody, 1 foot of progress at a time, 2 steps forward, 3 steps back, trench warfare. What is a common sense battle tactic if that's the case? So that's part of what we're going to refer to as the solutions or possible solutions to the muck and the mire that we're slowly digging ourselves into. So we're going to start off by giving an update on some of the lawmaking stuff that's happening in our state of Nevada here. The deadline, to get bills passed has already come and gone. Some are still sitting in front of the governor. There's provisions in our Nevada law that the governor can either veto, which means oppose the legislation, so then it goes back and then they have to vote 2/3 majority in order to get the bills to become law to override the veto. The numbers are pretty staggering as it is. Like we say in previous shows, the Democrats already have a supermajority membership in the lower house, which is the assembly. They're 1 vote away from having a supermajority in the Senate. But in this session, a lot of that doesn't really matter because we have some Republican senators that like to jump in and play buddy-buddy with their Democrat colleagues. So we'll get into some of that here. One of the ones that we mentioned before was AB 246, which was an election, I would call it, like in the last episodes that we've had here, it kind of just burdens the county clerks. It adds a lot of red tape. It adds a lot of cumbersome mandates to how elections are run, as far as providing, I think, a toll-free number for people, different procedures where they have to update websites, have certain information for certain, we're in the state of division, people, so there's all the left and the media that want to cut us up into different groups and different victim classes. So there's obviously going to be provisions for certain groups of people, whether they're minorities or part of the other divisive groups that the media likes to highlight on. I mean, this is going to open up a Pandora's box of annoying things for our electoral systems, as if we don't already have a questionable system in place where we are. I'll let you know for sure right now, I don't have confidence in our election system. Not in this county, not in the state of Nevada, not in the country for sure. And when we see Nevada, rallying around certain laws that want to make it even more cloudy, make it more cumbersome, open up more avenues to have shady election practices. I think our natural inclination is to rebel against that, but our lawmakers, they don't have common sense inclinations like that. Like I mentioned before, I think there's this Carson City bubble that they live in. They're out of touch a lot of times with the population of the state of Nevada as a whole. I would consider us to be, if you polled every single citizen, every single person in the state of Nevada, it's hard to believe that they would be as liberal, as left-leaning as our state lawmakers are. I don't think the lawmakers in Carson City are very proportionally representative of the political ideology that kind of moors our state. But I think when you mix in voter apathy, when you mix in shady tactics, when you mix in politicians packaging up laws as if they're good and hoodwinking the electorate, that creates a major problem. And they're hitting us on all fronts right now. The progressives in our legislature, they're trying to go by the route of just simple votes to change laws, or gathering enough support that they would be able to override a veto in case our governor decides to veto some of these last-minute bills. And they're also trying to change the Constitution. And I think that one is the most insidious aspect of it. And there's another one that I wanted to highlight on today as well that I mentioned a few weeks back, but it definitely has passed. And I'll cut to that. That was supposed to be later in the show, but I'll go ahead and highlight that now. It was called Assembly Joint Resolution 6. And for some of the folks that didn't hear it on a different show, a resolution like this that proposes to amend the Nevada Constitution, it needs to pass in the lower house and the Senate in 2 consecutive terms. So it's passed now, and it needs to pass again in 2 years, and then it's going to go to a popular vote with the people, and it has to get a simple majority as a ballot initiative, or a ballot question, and then it will become a change to our Constitution. And what AJR 6 was the National Vote Compact. It's passed both chambers. It was a mostly partisan divide. I think all the Republicans voted against it, which, thank you, Senate Republicans, Assembly Republicans. That was the right move. Oddly enough, one Democrat actually broke and sided with the GOP in that vote. So what the National Vote Compact effectively does, and it will do in the next 2 to 4 years if all goes well for the progressives in our state, you got to wonder, why are they really after this? Why are they after this? But what it does is it takes the votes in a presidential election for the state of Nevada, and even if Nevada were to overwhelmingly vote for one candidate of one party over the other, if the opposite candidate gets more national votes, popular votes, combined in every state in the country, then our electoral votes for the state of Nevada has to mirror the popular vote. So to put that in perspective, say, for instance, in the next election cycle, the majority of the nation popularly votes for Donald Trump. I don't think that'll happen, but it could. But then what if our state were to vote for the Democrat candidate? Then Donald Trump would actually still win the state because of the national numbers would favor him. Now that, to me, is that's a dream sequence, because that, personally, I don't see that ever happening. What I see happening, what I see could happen is, say Donald Trump were to lose the national popular vote and Biden happens to win it. But then say Donald Trump does win Nevada. Well, it won't matter to us Nevadans whether we voted for Donald Trump or not, because we have to send our electoral college representatives up there to cast their vote, which determines the president, in favor of the national vote winner, which would be Joe Biden. What does that do on the practical scale? It ends up making these candidates that are running for U.S. president not want to care about a state that only has 6 electoral votes, like Nevada. They're going to concentrate all their rallies, all their big events in the coastal metropolises, the huge population centers. Maybe Las Vegas gets a visit or two from the major candidates, because that's a huge, 2 million plus metropolitan area. But most of Nevada and most small states, Alaska, Hawaii, for instance, I don't know, Rhode Island, Vermont, I don't know, some of these other states aren't really going to get a lot of exposure, and nor is it a good allocation of the candidate's time. Why would they spend their time, like in this cycle, visiting 99 counties in Iowa when they can just focus rally after rally in, Houston or New York City or, Los Angeles, San Francisco, like the bigger population centers? That's what's going to happen. And you're going to have coastal elites, I like to call them. Doesn't mean they're rich people. It's more with an attitude, right? This elitist, entitled attitude that you get a lot in some of these urban areas, especially on the coast, where they're already so self-important. They're going to actually have their votes, their opinion's going to matter more than yours. And I'm assuming by yours, I mean anybody who lives in town like I live. I live in Pahrump. Our population is not even 100,000. Yet sometimes we're an active participant in the bigger political scheme of things, even on the presidential level. Like Donald Trump's son has visited here in Pahrump, has had political events and different things like that. I think all that stuff kind of dries up if we do pass AJR 6 in the next legislative cycle and in the next ensuing popular vote on a ballot, because for some reason or another, like we've said before, Nevadans love to vote yes on ballot questions, and almost irrespective of the actual consequences which are almost always dire. In the year 2030, it's like a ticking time bomb when all these extra regulations kick in on how we're to get our energy from green sources, so-called green energy, which is the furthest thing from green that you can imagine in the practical world. It's going to constrict the market for fossil fuels. It's going to amp up the price for fossil fuels, and like we highlighted on shows before, what are the fuels that ensure your survival if you're in an extremely cold climate or an extremely hot climate? Is it going to be wind turbines? Is it going to be solar power? It's going to be fossil fuels, right? So when those are in short supply or expensive supply, so expensive to where the average person or family can't afford it, what do? And I don't think our government's going to let massive amounts of people of lower income strata suffer. But what they're going to do is they're going to make them dependent on big government. I think that's the plan all along, right? Make things so hard on the everyday person or the elderly person or the young person or the single parent household or people that are just a few paychecks away from destitute living conditions, make them more and more dependent on the government so that they can be controlled. And I see, 2030 as being another level, another, step up that ladder of dependence that our nation ultimately, if we keep on this course, we're just going to be two classes, the haves and the have-nots, just like Marxism, right? The have-nots are going to be completely dependent on the haves for everything. There will be no working class, lower middle class, upper middle class. It's going to be you either have a whole bunch or you have almost nothing. And our leaders, unfortunately, nationally, on both sides of the aisle, seem perfectly okay with that. I've made the argument several times in mixed company, in any kind of company, and I think on this show at different times. I think the Republican leadership, by and large, I'm talking about the Mitch McConnell, Lindsey Graham types, I think that they're okay with being in the minority party, just so as long as they get their little share of the proceeds of kind of sticking it to the American people, right? It reminds me of the Braveheart movie. For any of you have, if any of you have seen it, I've seen it probably 30 times. I'm a weirdo like that. But, there's a time when William Wallace, who's the Scottish rebel leader, right, trying to battle for Scottish independence over the British, over the English, and there's lords, right? So there's property owners, there's people that, have peasants working their land, but by and large, they in the beginning of the movie, at least, they want independence. They want to fight alongside William Wallace. They don't look at the English crown as a friend. But what does the English crown do? Elevates them a little bit, offers them extra lands, extra privileges, extra money, extra perks. Not so that they can rise to the level of the actual English hierarchy, but so they can maintain a high enough level above the peasants that they're happy to stick it to the peasants. And in that movie, we see what happens to some of these English lords that betray William Wallace. It doesn't end well for them, right? They become the enemy to William Wallace. They become, and they're part of the group of people that gets ultimately thrown out. He leads a rebellion, and they're considered an enemy, just like the English king and his soldiers. So that's kind of how I view Mitch McConnell as a sellout. And he's not alone. There's dozens of little mini Mitches out there that would aspire, that would love to be in that position that Mitch McConnell's in. It's like the system that we support, that we continue voting in, and we continue supporting. It seems to just press out these really unimpressive politicians like Mitch McConnell, like Lindsey Graham, that their most notable accomplishments tend to be warmongering, putting your sons and daughters in harm's way, battling wars and engaging in conflicts in areas that don't preserve American liberty and security, while our borders are porous, while our crime is out of control in our country, while we're dealing with real live problems here in our country. They're the ones that want to go ahead and just join the globalists. And at that level, I think we're almost kind of doomed. The system just continues to propel these people because they always need millions of dollars to maintain their seats, and they're controlled by corporate interests. They're controlled, by and large, by forces of darkness that we just don't comprehend. So where does that leave us? That leaves us at the local level as the only practical way that we can try to get ahead, that we can join in the fight, that we can make a bona fide difference in it. And honestly, if we make the right choices at the most local of levels, I'm talking, county level, maybe state level, but county level, town level, we can actually better our lives. Because although some of the stuff happening in Washington, D.C. is very important, some of the stuff happening with the Supreme Court of the United States is very important, but almost equally important is what happens in our own Nevada Supreme Court and what happens in our own states, in our own counties, through our county commissions, through our school boards, through our sheriff's offices, through our police departments all throughout the state. It's important to cut in our library boards. Think about all these different areas that local people, like some of you listening, that you could kind of jump in that arena. And I know what you're probably thinking. You're probably thinking, yeah, I think if I ever did something like that, I might be pretty good. But that's not for me. I'm not a politician. I'm just a simple. Well, that means that maybe if you have any kind of desire, or if you kind of don't want to do it, that's almost one of the marks of maybe that you need to do it, because for right or wrong, we live in a country that still has a lot of plentiful blessings, a lot of I'd still rather be born in this country than any country in the world right now. We still have opportunities. The door hasn't closed all the way. The ship can be righted, or at least the descent into chaos and poverty ultimately can be avoided. We can still stop that from happening. I'm fully confident about that. So going back a little bit, I know it's kind of a back and forth manic depressive podcast that we might be a part of, but just to highlight some of the bills, and we're going to probably slow it down and not really talk much more about this because thankfully our legislature only meets every 2 years. So this isn't going to be a talk that we have perpetually all the time. So every 2 years we're meeting for 4 months, and I'm sure they're going to have that special session called about the motion picture credits and the stadium package that we're going to be selling out our state for. And here's the ultimate problem. And I get people kind of digging at me and saying, what's the big deal? Like, what do you just hate, like, economic productivity? What I don't like is the government picking winners and losers. I don't like having the general public need to foot the bill, bear the consequence for billionaires and at the very least 100 millionaires to come into our town, to come into our state, build a stadium, pay the players that play for their teams, 9-figure contracts, while they're asking us taxpayers to kind of foot the bill and subsidize their private endeavors. It'd be different if it was like a park, right? I mean, I go to the park a few miles from my house. I can enjoy it. I can bring my kids there. They could go on the slides, sit under a big shade tree. You know what we don't do when we go to the park? We don't have to pay like $50 a head and $15 popcorn just to walk into the event, because it's a service to the community. So, there's give and take, right? You give some taxes for some, and you get services like parks, like roads, like schools, right? Public schools. We don't pay to put our kids in public school because our taxpayers pay it. Our taxpayers are funding a stadium. Does that mean we get to walk into the Oakland A's, Las Vegas A's, or whatever we decide to call them when they're here, and just go watch baseball games for free and get free popcorn? No, we're going to pay for parking. We're going to pay exorbitant rates to get into the games. Where's the benefit there? So all benefit for the owners. And sure, it does do some jobs. The unions love it for construction, electrical, carpentry, everything, whatever. Multiple unions are going to just love the money that they can get and the jobs that they can get for these projects. I get it. And the idea is that, maybe more people decide to move here. It'll be a boom for the economy. But out of the same sentiment, out of the other side of the mouth, you hear people complaining about housing, right? About it's not affordable. We've even passed laws here in this session that are theoretically there to advance the advantages for the tenant, because the tenant is facing such hardships and the price of rent is getting out of control, and there needs to be some checks and balances for these wicked, homeowners that are renting out their places. One such example is, what is it? I think one's called AB 298, which is kind of staggering because it throws a lot of red tape at landlords. One piece of the red tape, and actually two different bills have the exact same terminology, AB 298 and SB 78, which both are becoming the law of the land. The one thing that they share in common, for instance, and I know this might not be a big deal to a lot of listeners. You're thinking like, oh, what's the big deal? That's just like, $15, 20, 30, 40, $50 that a landlord eats. But basically what it does is it, part of this bill, and this is only one slice of the apple of the bill that I have a beef with, but for the sake of time, we'll concentrate on this. This is enough reason for me to not ever have voted for it. A landlord cannot collect he or she can collect an application fee for multiple prospective tenants that are looking to rent their home, whether it's an apartment, a condo, a house. So say, you get 5 applicants and you want to screen them out and get the best applicant for your home as a landlord. I say us landlords. I'm not a landlord anymore, but I was in the past, had a few nightmare scenarios. Trust me, the laws weren't really protecting me when I was a landlord, and now they're even harder. But if you collect an application fee under this new law, for each person that you don't accept, you have to return the money. So if you charge, say, a $40 application fee because you're doing due diligence and you're checking people's credit, and that costs money to run those tenant screenings and all that stuff, check people's credit, you can only keep the application fee on the tenant that actually procures the unit or procures the rental. So if 5 people apply, you have to return 4 of those application fees. So if the intended consequence or the intended goal of such a bill as SB 78 or AB 298 is to help out the tenants, what they're really doing is now they're teaching by these restrictions landlords, homeowners, prospective landlords to be much more vigilant and maybe even decide not to rent out their home. And what does that do to the housing supply? It shrinks it. What happens when the demand is high and the supply shrinks? What happens to the cost? And in this case, what happens to the rental prices? Well, they go up. Landlords don't necessarily want to do harm to tenants, but they have to CYA. That means cover your butt. They have to cover their own butt on these deals, or they can get taken to the cleaner. So that alone, and believe me, there's multiple things in each of these bills that I have a problem with, but that one just stands out easy to explain to you. Oddly enough, AB 298 had 8 GOP assembly members vote in favor of this bill that restricts and makes it harder for landlords in favor of tenants. And I know sometimes out of political expedience you want to do that, right? Because let's face it, there's probably more people on balance that relate to being a tenant or can imagine themselves as a tenant, even if they've never rented, than they could imagine themselves as a landlord. You know, the media and the powers out of in our culture kind of perpetuate the myth that a lot of landlords are these slumlords, these fat cats that are just fleecing and taking advantage of tenants. And, you know, some of them are. Some of them are just kind of pain in the butt. Some of them are particular. You know, I've had landlords in the commercial side of things, like for my businesses, that are just kind of very picky and choosy and not the easiest to deal with, but you find a way to make it work because business is business and you take the good with the bad. But I don't need our legislature going out there and making it even harder on commercial landlords, because what would that do to the prices of commercial rentals, you know, such as the one that I rent? It would probably put pressure on that to make it more expensive to run a business. Just like I don't want to see it in the long run. All these restrictions that they're trying to put on these landlords end up actually having an adverse reaction in the market and put even higher pressure on rentals to go up, because the government on one hand is trying to help out the tenants, or at least have the perception that they're helping out the tenants, that they really care about the common person, while at the same time probably passing resolutions to, you know, increase the population in Southern Nevada to the point where it's going to push prices higher. And ultimately, I think that's the goal, right? I think some of these politicians, especially on the left, would love nothing more than absolute rent control. That's probably the goal. Might not get there this session or in 2 years, but that's the ultimate goal. You know, they're battling it out. They're playing the long game. You know, you heard that said before. They may not look for that quick victory now, but they're setting the table. They're moving their little chess pieces in different spots so that they can checkmate us, you know, 2, 4, 6 years down the line. That's kind of how they got to where they are now with the numbers that they have, because Nevada is not an overwhelmingly progressive or liberal state. Yes, we do have population bases that tend to be more Democrat voting than they are Republican voting, for instance, but not to the degree that you see in our legislature, not 2-1. That's not exactly how it dials out. So that tells me some things are happening in our culture here in Nevada, in our voting behaviors, in our our political activism, or whatever you want to call it, or inactivism for that matter. There's some stuff happening here. We're going to talk more about this after the break, so stick with us.
Why I'm Proud to Be an American by Devin Craddy. 158 years ago, our amazing 16th president, Abraham Lincoln, wrote a very powerful speech called the Gettysburg Address. In this speech, he told us we should honor the deceased by continuing to fight for what they died for during the Civil War, which allowed us peace and freedom in America, which is why I'm very passionate for our country. We will always fight for what we think is right. This message brought to you by Matt Sadler.
Veterans Crisis Line. Dial 988. Veterans Crisis Line. Dial 988. Then press 1. Someone is available who cares. Someone is available who will listen. Someone is available who will help. Veterans Crisis Line. 988.
Election day is around the corner, and you'll soon have a million choices to make at the ballot box. But right now, your number one choice for freedom is a no-brainer. It's Matt Sadler with a Hope Bail Bond. Choose Matt Sadler for your Nevada bail bondsman. Matt Sadler has been your number one local bail agent 3 years running. Nye County. Let's keep Matt Sadler in his office. For the best way out of jail, call 442-BAIL. He's Matt Sadler, and he approves your freedom.
Welcome back. So before the break, we were talking about some things going on in the election world here, and especially as it pertains to the Republican, or I guess you'd call it the conservative voice in Nevada. How is it being dulled? Is it only indifference? Is there just a better get out the vote platform, more aggression from the liberal school of thought in Nevada? And I think so. I think I think both things can be true at the same time. So what I find when I talk to most people I speak to, especially in our community here in Pahrump, tend to be center right, or some of them right, I guess, if you're talking about the political spectrum. Left meaning, super liberal or leftist, progressive, and then right being, far right, conservative, limited government, laissez-faire, all that stuff. So most folks, I think, are center right. How they vote, though, when they vote, if they vote, sometimes it's not in their best self-interest. What I find is a lot of apathy. A lot of folks that you talk to are a little bit dejected because they feel like, what does it matter? You vote for this person, you vote for that person. What you get is what you get. Politicians are all the same. They're all playing for the same team, and it's hard to fault people for thinking that way. But the problem is, and I made this analogy before, just because something is not a clear-cut, better decision that is great in all ways doesn't mean it's not a decision worth making. So, like I said in the previous podcast, if you had your choice between paying, let's say, $100 for your electric bill in the summer or $300, what would you want to pay? Now, some people can say, well, I'd rather pay $0 per month, so I'm not going to vote for either. I won't vote for the $100 bill or the $300 bill. Well, what if then by not voting, you get shellacked and stuck with the $300 bill? By not voting, by not making a choice, the lesser of two evils, if you will, you get stuck with the more evil of the evils. And what we find over time is we make enough apathetic decisions or indecisions like that in life, and we end up getting what we get. A friend of mine says, hey, if you're not proactive, the government you get is what they want to give you and not what you demand. And I think we need to demand more in our government. We need to demand more from our leaders. So what is the other side doing so much better to command these leads of 2-1? So in other words, in the House of Representatives, I believe there's 28 Democrats, 14 Republicans, or not the House of Representatives, the Assembly, the lower house. So you have 28 Democrats versus 14 Republicans. They're outnumbered 2-1. In the Senate, a total of 21 people. I believe it is, 15 No, that can't be right. It's not 15-6. It's more like, 13 to 8? So one more swing vote in the Senate makes it 14-7, gives them a 2-1 advantage, which is a supermajority. So that's why certain bills out there have passed or have garnered support. For instance, that Assembly Bill 246 that we were talking about earlier, it looks like Heidi Severs Gansert and Scott Hammond, both Republicans in the Senate, voted yes on that bill. That's the election bill that's creating all these cumbersome tasks that our county clerks have to put up with during the election season. So it's a bill that muddies the water, that makes it more difficult, that gives more centralized control to the state of Nevada, to the Secretary of State, where, I like many of you listening, am not in favor of a large, all-powerful, centralized government. I think the best forms of government tend to be the most local. So having that power distributed at the local level is better than having somebody at the very top of the state, like the Secretary of State or the governor, that can wield a hammer and axe and just make us do whatever they want us to do. I think when you have that power brokered out through all of our counties here in Nevada, because each county is going to have different needs, different methods, different financial resources to enact certain things. And when you strip the localities, when you strip them of this ability to govern themselves, that's when bad things can happen. And this bill was an unnecessary one, Assembly Bill 246, which I believe if the governor just sits on it now for another day or two and doesn't decide to veto it, it will automatically become law, because I think he has 5 days to either veto it or sign it. If he does neither, it just kind of becomes law automatically. Because if you were to veto it, for instance, this late in the game, then maybe we'd have to call a special session back in a few days. A taxpayer waste of money for them to come back with these exact same numbers and override his veto. So, I understand to a certain degree Governor Lombardo, if he were to just let some of these super majority type bills just automatically become law without him vetoing it. I understand it's a frustrating situation for the governor to be in. One that I think he should have probably taken a better stand on, and we touched on this one a little bit last week, was SB 172, which it kind of puts the screws to parents, and it makes it to where parents don't even have to be notified, let alone give consent for their minor child to receive birth control and or intrauterine devices. So that bill was actually signed by the governor. I'm very sad to see that happened. I had a feeling that it was going to do that. It was going to become a law either way, because Heidi Severs Gansert was, I believe, the lone Republican senator that voted in favor of that, which gave them that 14-7 advantage, the 2-1 advantage to override a veto. I really wish that could have been a ceremonial veto, if nothing else, because I think it's an evil bill. And I like I said before many times, the culture, the media, the sports world, entertainment world, the educational system, the higher educational system is all waging war against a parent, against the autonomy of a parent. They're stealing our kids. Slowly but surely, our minor children are becoming wards of the state. And we're just going to be the people jammed up in the middle that are tasked to feed our children, to clothe them, but not to have any kind of say on the morality with which we're bringing them up. And it's ridiculous. And I think it's going to cause some people to want to leave a state like this. The more they see how tough it is, how much more we're becoming a progressive state here in Nevada, a lot of people that think like I do might be leaving, and maybe you're a listener that doesn't mind that. I don't know, I'm not pretending to agree with all of you, and nor do I expect all of you listeners to agree with me. But one thing I can promise you is that you're always going to get my honest take on anything and everything. I've lived my life that way. I try not to be offensive to people, but I don't want to sugarcoat things. I'm never unnecessarily harsh. I try to be diplomatic, but at the same time, life is too short to not just say what you mean and mean what you say. So much in our world is just, people kind of masking themselves. And that builds resentment over time when people aren't authentic. I think they just don't like that. I remember being a kid and even being an adult in situations where, say there was a pizza party or there was food in the break room at work or whatever. And you could tell that people in there wanted that last piece of pizza or that last donut or whatever it was. And everybody's being polite and, I think I'm good. I think I'm okay. And if I was hungry and no one else was asking for it, I'd be like, I'll take it. I'll take that piece of pizza. I'll take that donut. I did the same thing with roommates when I was 19 years old. Renting a 3-bedroom house. There's one master bedroom, right? We're all agreeing to pay like, $250 a month or whatever it would have been our share of a $900 rent. So like $250 to $300 a month. Because the person who got the master would probably pay a little bit more. And the other roommates were just being super polite. Not really, I don't really care about the master bedroom. And I was like, I do. I'll take it. I'll pay the extra $25-$50 a month for the master bedroom. You kidding me? Yeah, for sure. Come to find out later on, they have a little bit of animosity toward that, and we're a little bit irritated. I don't know why. I mean, we could have still figured something out. Could have drawn straws. Could have, rock, paper, scissors tournament. Something like that. But, if you want something, be polite about it, but go after it, right? You want a job promotion at your work? You don't have to hide that. You want to ask for a raise? You deserve more money at your job. You work hard. You provide value for your employer. It's okay to ask. Don't feel like it's a rude thing. It's okay. Don't be afraid of an awkward situation. I think oftentimes that's another symptom of why we conservatives don't get a lot done, is that we don't voice our opinions enough. We don't talk about things that matter enough in certain parts of our life. We're always taught not to mix religion and politics. It's impolite conversation. But at the same time, I remember being in a union years ago and talking to other union members, many of whom were not conservative. I would consider them kind of blue dog Democrat type folks, good people, rational people. But when it came time to election season, when the union put out a pamphlet of preferred candidates and all that kind of stuff on who to vote for, they had no problem talking about it in the break room or just taking that pamphlet and applying it to their voting behavior and support. But somehow that wasn't rude for that to be brought to. That's not impolite when it's a union organization that feeds you their can't see the other side's not afraid to be impolite and to interject and step on toes, to let their opinions known. But somehow I think a lot of Republicans, a lot of conservatives, constitutionalists even, tend to shy away from that. They have their own core convictions. They keep things a little bit too private. So as a consequence, when they're the silent voices out there, when the media and the culture and social media and Facebook and Twitter have the loudest voices being the most progressive voices, you tend to think that's what reality is, but that's not the reality that we live in. We live in a center or center-right community here in rural Nevada, yet we don't hear those same types of voices. So you mix that with the apathy, the indifference that many times we have. I mean, I talked to people that I thought had good-sized brains in between their two ears during the last election cycle that I was kind of a part of as a candidate. And even when folks didn't know who I was, they would ask me, my advice on some candidate races, right? Maybe not mine, because maybe they knew me a little bit and they already knew who they were voting for in my race, but they're saying, well, what do you think about this person or that person? And I would see that their ballot was already marked, and I would ask them, well, what made you vote for For this person, we're talking about the primary, so mostly Republicans coming up to me, showing me their Republican sample ballot and saying, well, what do you think about this person over that person? And I would say, well, why did you mark this person? They would say, honestly, well, because their name just shows up first on the ballot. And when I don't know two candidates, I just mark the first one at top. So that means you get all this reward for having your last name begin with the letter that is earlier in the alphabet, and that is the deductive reasoning some Republican voters are taking with them to the polls. I was always taught by my dad, or my dad would say things when I was younger that, you should go out there and exercise your vote. You should cast your vote, if for no other reason than you have a right to vote and you should exercise it. And the older I get, I'm thinking that's not sound advice, because an ill-informed vote sometimes is a bad vote, right? Is that how some of these RINOs, for lack of a better word, because I think that's what they are, RINOs. Man, I'm just thinking, if I had spent 4 months up there in Carson City, had things gone differently in my election, how many friends would I have made up there in this party? I don't know, honestly, because so many of them have thrown me for a loop. I definitely don't think I would have had a net gain of friends had I been in Carson City, but that's okay, because I have a few good ones. And one of my friends always says, if you have like 5 good friends your whole life, people that you can count on through the years, you're really lucky. You're really fortunate. And I think that's true. And I can say that I've had that, and that I have that, especially when you mix in family, cousins. I definitely have that. I'm blessed. So I don't necessarily need to grow the Sadler circle of trust that much in order to be fulfilled. I'm a family guy first and foremost. Left to my own devices and my own inclinations, I'm a complete couch potato or lazy boy recliner potato that likes to just stay at home as much as I can, no matter how much life and my job and different things pull me out and about. But that's kind of my inclination. The inclination of many of these progressive voters and the movement behind electing a lot of progressive candidates, and I'll say even the people out there that might be progressive, leftist, that realize that the situation that they're in might be that, okay, well, this is a Republican county, this is a Republican area. Let's put our forces in to help the most progressive Republican win office, since a Republican's going to win it. I think they are very diligent in their efforts to get out the vote, to ballot harvest. These things are techniques that we conservatives need to use because A, they're legal, and B, they appear to be highly effective. So ballot harvesting means, like, say, an example might be going to to help with a seminar at the senior center or something, and you go there and you offer to gather, to harvest, if you will, some senior citizens' ballots or their actual ballot, to go take it then to the clerk's office to make sure that their vote is deposited into the secured voting location, stuff like that. That would be an example of ballot harvesting. The left is doing a lot of that. I mean, anybody that's watched the 2000 Mules movie knows that they've done it, and that definitely veers into the realm of illegal activity, or the presumption that there was illegal activity going on with some of those ballot harvesting techniques. But the legal ballot harvesting, since it's the law of the land, should be something that we Republicans do get involved with. Other tactics, if you will, would be like phone banking. So getting on the phone, getting involved with the local, I'll say, Republican Party, because we have an apparatus in place that can assist with things like that. So if you have candidates that you're really supporting, go make a couple hundred phone calls on their behalf. If you had a bunch of people that get involved and do that kind of thing, highly effective. Door to door, obviously. If you go to candidates that you're backing, chances are they have literature, door hangers, cards, you name it, something that you can go door to door. Campaign season, help them to canvass neighborhoods using stuff like that. Social media, don't be afraid. How many times are you offended when you're on Facebook or Twitter by people that you consider to be your friends or colleagues or coworkers? You know, your children's friends, parents or something, and they're emboldened. They say things online that you might find, you know, disagreeable, but do you hate them? No. Chances are you can still get along with them. I can get along with tons of people I disagree with, but don't mute your voice for the sake of obeying the 11th commandment, thou shalt be nice. Don't do that. There's things that are so important out there that if you're not willing to just type it out, open your mouth, express conviction on it, you know, we're going to get steamrolled by a tsunami of leftist, Marxist policies. We're seeing it right now in Nevada. Just in my relatively, I won't say young lifetime, I'm definitely middle-aged by now, but in my years on this earth, it's gone, the pendulum has swung completely into the other direction. So why are we afraid to enter into seemingly uncomfortable conversations? Well, we shouldn't be. We shouldn't be. I think we're deceived a little bit in our culture. The old wives' tales about impolite conversation, it's not. That doesn't mean you have to be merciless, to be rude, too forceful. Be diplomatic. Be gracious with your differences of opinion. Have a reasoned argument. Listen first. Hold to your conviction and be able to articulate your core convictions, your preferences, your opinions. That they're the things that really do matter. How boring is life when we're just sitting there chit-chatting about just dopey things, you know? And it doesn't take much, because chances are you're bumping into somebody, even though casual, polite conversation, that person's almost secretly hoping that you open up an avenue for more meaningful discussion. And if you could just break that ice, you know, that could delve into a whole conversation, and pretty soon someone else that hears you talking comes over. You bounce ideas off of one another. You never know what kind of synergy or effect that can have, you know. And don't be afraid to do that with the younger generation. I talk to so many adults, and I see it around me all the time. You know, and none of us adults that are my age that have kids that are now, you know, I have a graduate now that graduated high school as a homeschooler. Congratulations, Abigail. So my peer group now has children that are adults. And so often when I'm talking to them, and believe me, I was not a perfect kid. I did a lot of stuff wrong. And so many of them will say, well, who am I to tell my kid that they can't, you know, have alone time or have their boyfriend or girlfriend in the room? You know, Lord knows that I was, you know, sneaking into a girl's bedroom or different things. Like, people will say that, right? So who am I to say that you can't do that? Well, you're the parent. You absolutely can say that. Just because you had mistakes in your life. I mean, if you broke your arm as a kid, should you break your child's arm because that's how you grew up? No, you want the best for your children. You want to learn from your own mistakes. So if you tried drugs or if you were underage drinking as a youth, doesn't mean you have to be okay with your kid doing that. Just because you made mistakes and you'll feel like a hypocrite, who cares what you feel like if you feel like a hypocrite or if you are a hypocrite? First and foremost, your role as a parent. Your role is to parent that child, to make good decisions for that child, not based upon your life experiences or your mistakes. Why would you want your kid to go into the same exact mistake? If you knew there was a pothole on your street and you drove it the night before, going to get pizza for the household or something, and you hit it, and then your kid gets in a car, are you going to say, well, I guess she's going to have to hit that pothole too because, you know, I stupidly drove into a pothole, and who am I to tell my kid to avoid a pothole? You know, she's just going to have to figure that out on her own. No. You learn from what you did wrong, your inattention, your you know, whether you were looking down at your cell phone, whatever mistake you made, and impress it upon your kid to not be careless like you were, to be vigilant. If you were a bad voter in the past, if you voted for Bill Clinton or Barack Obama or Michael Dukakis or whatever you did, learn from your mistakes and teach your kids. So many people say, I don't want to teach my kids what to think or what to do. I'm going to teach them how to think. Well, that sounds good if you're writing some kind of wannabe bestseller book, but in practicality, the entire world is telling your child what to do. Their school teacher, their PE teacher, for sure their college professors, the media, LeBron James, the sports world at large, musical entertainers. Everyone is trying to influence your kid. But you, why would you ever say that I don't want to teach my kid what to do? If you know something's right, teach your kid what's right. If you know something's wrong, teach them that it's wrong. Don't let them just stumble into mistakes. It's preposterous, right? You of all people should be the one exerting control over your child in a righteous way, albeit, but you should be the one controlling your child, because the advertisers out there, social media, the entertainment world, they don't care. They're going to do what they want. They're going to exert influence over your child. You have to come alongside. You have to be that filter for your children. And even so far as how they end up voting, naturally children are going to go through rebellious stages where, they know everything. They want to kind of do the opposite of what their parents do, but stick to it. Acknowledge that that's going to happen, but keep fighting. Don't throw in the towel. Keep having reasoned debates or arguments with your children if you have to about what's right and what's wrong, what's righteous and what's immoral. They need to know, because they're not going to learn it in universities. They're not going to learn it on social media. They're not going to learn it from Hollywood. As a side note, exactly what we're trying to import into our state is to make us mini Hollywood in Las Vegas. Good luck with the housing prices in Las Vegas if that comes through. Mix that with the A's and Major League Baseball moving in. No one's going to be able to afford anything. That's going to spill into my community. We're less than an hour away. What's that going to do to our housing prices, to our affordable housing? So that's one way to look at that. So we're kind of running out of time here. I think I've touched on everything I wanted to touch on, but again, to any folks out there that want to kind of get involved in a grassroots type way, this is a nice segue to a meeting this month. June 26th, 6 p.m. at the Bell Bonds office, 41 North Highway 160, Unit 5. We're having a Grassroots Conservatives of Nevada meeting again, and I've said it a few times. Primary purpose: active, healthy community engagement for citizens here in the Prump area. Also, with a heart focus on coming alongside prospective candidates, righteous candidates, good people to run for office, to help them, to encourage them, and to help them become viable, because we have to fix our backyard. We have to fix things locally before we can ever hope of changing things on the national scale. We start doing stuff in our own neighborhoods, in our own counties. And don't get me wrong, we got to have our Republican nominee take that presidency over in 2024. Absolutely important, but equally important, or even sometimes more important, we need to get things right here locally. So if you're curious about that, you can always go to the website, grassrootsconservativesofnevada.com. There's also a link on our website, thenevadapatriot.com. Hope to see you there. Again, it's Monday the 26th at 6 p.m. So, with all that said, I thank you again, listeners, for sticking around for this hour and listening and lending your ear. And I really hope that together we can make some of these changes. We can look at things in a different way, and we can make our community better. So until the next episode next week, God bless you.
Thank you for listening. Tell a friend and join us next time. After you catch your breath, check out the NevadaPatriot.com for more content, advertising opportunities, and to give listener feedback. That website again is the NevadaPatriot.com. Until next time, Patriots, stay American.